And welcome back. Well, 50 million Americans will traipse through wetlands, endure mosquitoes, or brave freezing winds to just catch a glimpse at a bird. Our fascination with winged creatures is nothing new.
Our next guest has spent years studying birds and is now sharing this book, Taking Flight: The History of Birds and People in the Heart of America. We are happy to welcome author Michael Edmonds to the Yellow Couch.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity.
This is exciting. I mean, you've written this book. It's all about the history and birds, our fascination, and some of our fears. A lot of people would say, is this a little bit of an eccentric thing to study? Why birds? What brought you to this study?
I know it. It's definitely an eccentric thing to study, isn't it? But everything has a history.
Yeah.
You know, we're sitting here doing a TV news talk show. They have a history. Began with Phil Donahue 50 years ago. And the way people have thought about and acted toward birds has a history too. Nature has a history. And that's what the book is about.
Love that.
Nature is so amazing, and there's nothing more enjoyable than looking out on your deck and seeing a bright cardinal at your feeder, or a finch, or even woodpeckers have a place, you know, in this. Yeah. And so how did it come about that you even took interest in doing this?
Well, when my wife was pregnant for the first time with our eldest child, we went up north to a cabin that belongs to her family. And while I was unloading the car, a great blue heron came by, almost close enough to touch. And I don't know if I'd ever noticed a great blue heron before. But
are they big?
They're very big.
Yeah, right? Okay. I want to make sure I was picturing the correct bird, right?
3-4 feet. Yeah. And it landed offshore and looked right back at me, and I thought, whoa, this is amazing. And I began doing what millions of bird watchers do, which is I bought a field guide, tried to identify the birds I was seeing, and that's where it began. And it starts that way for lots of people. Some memorable encounter with a bird gets them hooked.
We were talking during the break about the fact that many people feel there's some sort of mystical feeling to birds, or they find their loved one in them, or some sort of emotion attached to maybe people who have passed or things like that. Do you find that that's something that has a root in history, or that comes from somewhere? Is that just our thought?
No, it certainly does. In fact, for all the thousands of years people have lived here in Wisconsin, a religious attitude, a mystical attitude toward birds was the primary one.
Is it because they can fly?
Science hadn't been born yet. Yes, Native American elders often would write about birds that they could fly as high as the Creator. They were close to the Creator because they could fly to the sky and disappear from sight. And then other birds, ducks and loons, would dive deep into the underworld and not resurface. So the mystical attitude, or sensitive, intuitive attitude toward birds existed much longer than our scientific one.
They're such interesting creatures, you know. You talked about having an invitation. You felt that blue heron was like an invitation, and this is what unfolded. So someone who read an advanced copy of the book on the back cover says after reading it, they will never look at birds the same way again, and you'll never look at humans the same way. And why did he say that? For these reasons?
Yeah. I think we often don't think about why we think the way we do, but the three of us were just saying we have kind of a scientific view of birds. That's nature, it's objects. But prior to science, people didn't react that way at all. They felt much more from the heart. And so to read the history of how people thought about and then acted toward birds makes you see it very differently. It makes you question the way you look at the world, which was one of the things I hoped the book would do.
I love that. Does it also identify birds, or is it really just the story and the history?
It's the story and the history.
Okay.
There's very little about birds as you see them today. So it assumes you see birds already.
Perfect. So is there a moral lesson? Is there something that, you know, we as Midwesterners would relate to in terms of the takeaway from the book?
I'll give you a good example. I was driving down here from Madison this morning, and some geese flew across the highway, maybe as high as a telephone pole. And I thought, well, of course, it's the first day of spring. The geese are here, they're flying north, and I felt all warm and fuzzy.
Yeah.
But 100 years ago, the farmer that lived right there would not have felt warm and fuzzy. He'd have grabbed his shotgun and said, free lunch, and gone after the birds. So the way we think then dictates how we act. And that's sort of the message of the book.
Do you get into personalities of birds? Because they do have them, don't they? Some are quirky and fun, just like people, and some are very, you know, solemn and very regal. I mean, do you think they have
there's a whole chapter
personalities?
about bird folklore, and that has a lot to do with how people perceive the personalities of birds.
That's fun.
What's your favorite bird? I know you got one.
Sandhill cranes
Yeah?
are so majestic, and they reach back evolutionarily millions of years, and they're still here.
Yeah, I do think of a lot of birds as looking almost a little prehistoric.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
the bills, the stature. Are there some birds that haven't changed a lot over history?
You know, I'm not a scientist, so
Okay.
I'm not sure, but I think most birds are very much the way they were
Yeah.
over the long span of history. Many birds that we see all the time were not here fairly recently. Little brown sparrows, you know,
Yeah.
like flying mice. Those are not native to North America. They were introduced in the 1850s, and they spread everywhere, and they displaced bluebirds. So imagine if bluebirds were as common as house sparrows like we see today. Wouldn't the world be different?
Oh, I miss the little bluebirds.
I know.
Yeah.
Me too.
Well, this is wonderful. People can actually get a copy and meet you tonight. Will you be there as well at the
will.
Urban Ecology Center at the Riverside Park at 7 o'clock tonight? You can get a copy. Again, this is co-hosted by Boswell Books. So the website for you to learn more is boswellbooks.com. Donations are encouraged, but come on out, enjoy the book, find a little more about the history of birds in Taking Flight, the history of birds and people in the heart of America. Your fear and your fascination covered in this read. Thanks so much for being here.
Nice
Thank
to
you.
meet you.
Thanks again.
All right.